The sea was calm when they set out, an endless blue silk stretching beneath a flawless sky. Ethan had never seen Claire so radiant. She stood at the bow of the yacht, the wind teasing her hair into wild ribbons, laughing as if nothing in the world could touch her. He loved that about her, how she carried sunlight even when the rest of him was cloud. They'd been engaged for only 3 months, but it already felt fragile. The trip was supposed to mend the cracks, his long absences at work, her quiet loneliness, the way they argued about everything and nothing. One weekend, she'd said. No phones, no deadlines, just us. He had agreed, though part of him still felt chained to the world he'd built on land. By dusk, the horizon burned gold, and the air changed. Clouds gathered, thick and bruised, the wind turning sharp. Claire frowned at the sky. "Ethan, is that normal?" "It'll pass," he said, glancing at the radar. A cluster of red blinked back. He didn't want to admit how wrong he might be. The first wave hit before he could secure the sails. The yacht lurched violently, tossing everything that wasn't nailed down. Claire screamed as the sea rose up, swallowing light, turning the world to chaos. Rain hammered down in sheets, and lightning tore the sky open. Ethan shouted orders to no one but himself, trying to keep control. "Get below deck," he yelled. She shook her head, clutching the railing. "Not without you." A second wave struck, harder. The mast cracked like bone. Water flooded the deck, and for a moment Ethan saw nothing but white foam and fear. He reached for her, but she was already slipping, her fingers slick with rain and salt. He caught her wrist barely, felt the tremor of her pulse against his thumb. "Hold on," he shouted. "I can't." Her eyes, green like the shallow edge of the sea, locked on his. And then the railing snapped. She was gone, swallowed whole. Ethan dove after her, the cold hitting him like glass. The storm spun him into darkness, pulling him down until he couldn't tell which way was air. He broke the surface once, gasping her name, but the wind stole it. The yacht was already drifting away, lights flickering like dying stars. Hours, or maybe only minutes later, he washed up on a small island, half conscious, lungs full of salt water. He crawled onto the sand and collapsed. When he woke, dawn was rising over the sea. The wreckage of the yacht floated in the shallows, bits of fabric and splintered wood glinting in the morning light. He called for her until his throat bled. No answer. Only gulls, circling above. By the second day, he found a single thing washed ashore, a delicate silver pendant, shaped like a wave. Her necklace. The one he'd given her when he proposed. He held it in his fist until his knuckles went white. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that she was gone, that no one could have survived the storm. And yet, he couldn't stop looking out to sea, waiting for her silhouette to reappear against the sunrise. When rescue came 3 days later, he told them she was dead. It was easier than explaining the truth that he'd lost her, not just to the ocean, but to his own hesitation. As the helicopter lifted him from the island, Ethan looked down one last time at the curve of the beach where he'd found her necklace. The sea looked calm again, as if nothing had happened. But something inside him had sunk too deep to ever surface again. 2 years later, the ocean still whispered her name. Ethan lived in a quiet apartment overlooking the harbor because, somehow, he couldn't bring himself to leave the sea entirely. Every morning, he woke before dawn and watched the fishing boats crawl out of the mist, their small lights gliding over dark water like ghosts. He told himself it was routine, but really, it was punishment. The sea had taken her, and still, he couldn't look away. He'd rebuilt his career easily enough. Success came to him like muscle memory, meetings, deadlines, the polite applause of colleagues. But behind every conversation, there was an echo. Sometimes he'd look across the conference table and, for a heartbeat, swear he saw her reflection in the window glass, wet hair clinging to her face, eyes full of stormlight. The therapist called it survivor's guilt. He called it living. At night, his dreams brought him back to the island. He'd wake to the sound of waves, the faint scent of salt and jasmine, the perfume she wore the day they left the marina. Sometimes he'd reach for her in the dark, whisper her name, and feel only cold sheets. He never told anyone the truth about that night. Not the Coast Guard. Not her parents. Not even himself, not completely. He had said the storm came too fast. That he dove for her and couldn't find her. That the sea was merciless. But in his mind, he replayed the moment over and over, the hesitation, the seconds he'd wasted trying to save the yacht instead of her. He had chosen survival when love demanded something else. One evening, he found himself walking down to the pier after work. The sky was heavy with rain, the kind that blurred the city lights into watercolor. He leaned against the railing, staring into the black water. Somewhere beneath that surface, her memory waited, patient as the tide. A small voice broke through the hum of the rain. "You shouldn't lean too far over. It's not safe." Ethan turned. A little girl stood beside him, maybe 7 or 8, holding her mother's hand. The woman smiled apologetically, her umbrella tilted against the wind. "Sorry," she said softly. "She worries about everyone." He nodded, returning the smile. "She's right. It's good advice." The woman's face caught the light for a moment and Ethan froze. The same eyes. The same mouth. The same tilt of the head when she smiled. He blinked. No. It couldn't be. But something inside him cracked open, something raw and wild. When he finally found his voice, she was already walking away, her hand in the child's. He stood there long after they'd disappeared into the rain, his pulse hammering in disbelief. That night, he couldn't sleep. The face replayed in his mind over and over, the impossible resemblance, the way his heart had stuttered like it recognized something before his brain did. By morning, he'd convinced himself it was a hallucination. But the next evening, he went back to the pier. And the next. And on the third night, she was there again, buying flowers from the old vendor by the docks. No child this time. The same dark hair, though shorter now. The same smile, though softer. She handed money to the vendor, thanked him, and turned toward the streetlight. Ethan's breath caught. He wanted to call out to her, but the words stuck in his throat. "Claire." He said it under his breath, and the sound of her name seemed to wake something buried inside him. The woman glanced up suddenly, as if sensing someone watching. Her eyes met his, green, calm, unfamiliar. And for a moment, neither of them moved. Then she looked away, stepped into a waiting cab, and vanished into the night. Ethan stood there, trembling, drenched in rain and disbelief. Maybe it wasn't her. Maybe grief was finally playing its cruelest trick. But he couldn't ignore the feeling that the sea hadn't taken her at all. It had only hidden her. Ethan didn't sleep for 3 nights. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her face, lit by the streetlight, blurred by rain, and still unmistakable. Claire. Or at least, the ghost of her. He tried to reason with himself. People look alike. Memory is cruel. Grief shapes the mind into a mirror that reflects what it wants to see. But logic couldn't dull the ache in his chest. On the 4th night, he found himself back at the pier, same hour, same restless wind. He watched every passing face, waiting. And just as the tide began to creep higher, she appeared again. No umbrella this time, just a light coat, hair slightly damp from drizzle. She was holding a small bouquet of white lilies. Ethan followed her at a distance as she crossed the street and entered a nearby cafe. The place was quiet, the kind of spot where the hum of espresso machines blended with the murmur of soft jazz. He took a seat in the corner, heart pounding. She ordered tea and sat by the window, her posture calm, unhurried. There was something serene about her, an ease that Claire never had. His fiancée had always been fire, passionate, impulsive, alive in a way that drew people in and burned them if they got too close. But this woman, she was gentler, as if she'd been carved down to something quiet by time and loss. Ethan knew he should leave. It was crazy to think she could be the same woman he'd lost at sea. But when she lifted her cup, he saw it, the silver pendant around her neck, shaped like a wave. Claire's necklace. The one he'd found washed ashore years ago. His stomach dropped. He didn't even realize he was standing until her eyes flicked up to meet his. There it was again, that familiar spark, though faint, buried beneath the calm. "Excuse me," he managed, approaching slowly. "Sorry to bother you, but, have we met before?" She tilted her head, studying him. "I don't think so," she said after a moment. Her voice was softer than he remembered, but the cadence, the way she lingered on certain syllables, it was her. "I could swear I've seen you somewhere," Ethan said carefully. "Maybe, near the marina?" Her brow furrowed slightly. "I don't go there often," she replied. I live nearby, though." She hesitated, as if uncertain of her own words. "Maybe that's it." He nodded, forcing a smile. "Maybe. I'm Ethan." "Lena," she said, extending her hand. He froze for a second before shaking it. "Lena." The name didn't fit, and yet it rolled off her tongue as though she'd worn it for years. They spoke for a few minutes, small talk about the rain, the city, the smell of the ocean. She seemed kind but distant, her eyes occasionally drifting as if listening to something only she could hear. Then, as she gathered her things to leave, Ethan noticed a faint scar along her wrist. A thin white line, shaped like a crescent. He remembered it. Claire had cut herself once while opening a bottle of champagne on the yacht. He'd teased her for being impatient, and she'd called him reckless. The scar was in the exact same place. "Lena," he said suddenly, his voice low. "Do you ever feel like there's something missing? Like there's a part of you you can't remember?" She blinked, startled. "That's a strange question." "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "Forget I asked. I just..." But she didn't move. For a long moment, she just looked at him, something flickering behind her eyes, curiosity, confusion, maybe even fear. Then she smiled politely. "You're right. The world's full of familiar strangers." She left, her perfume lingering like a memory. Ethan sat there long after she was gone, his hands trembling around his coffee cup. The scar, the necklace, the way she looked at him, it wasn't coincidence. He could feel it in his bones. If she truly was Claire, then something had happened, something that had taken her from the island, from him, from herself. And he was going to find out what. Ethan told himself he wouldn't go back. He told himself he'd let her be, this stranger with the same eyes, the same smile, the same impossible scars. But the truth was, he couldn't stay away. Each night he found himself near the cafe again, hoping she'd appear. It wasn't rational. It wasn't healthy. But the thought of walking away felt like drowning all over again. And then, one evening, he saw her. Lena sat at the same window seat, a book open beside her untouched tea. She was sketching something on a napkin, lines that curved like waves. Ethan hesitated outside the glass, heart thudding. Finally, he pushed open the door. She looked up, surprised, then smiled faintly. "Ethan, right?" He nodded, trying not to sound too eager. "Mind if I join you?" "Sure," she said, gesturing to the empty seat. "I was starting to feel like the only person in the city who drinks tea alone." They talked for hours. About everything and nothing, the weather, the city, music, the way the sea could make you feel small and infinite at once. She told him she'd moved here a year ago, said she couldn't remember much before that. "It's strange," she admitted, stirring her tea. "It's like my life started halfway through a story. There are flashes sometimes, a sound, a scent, but nothing stays long enough to make sense of it." Ethan's breath caught. "Flashes?" She nodded, eyes distant. "Sometimes I dream of water. The smell of salt. A storm, maybe. And someone calling my name, though I can never hear it clearly. When I wake, I feel heavy. Like I've lost something I can't name." He forced a smile, his pulse racing. "Dreams can be powerful," he said quietly. She gave him a searching look. "You sound like you know something about that." "I do," he murmured. "More than I'd like." For a moment, the air between them thickened, something unspoken, electric. It felt like standing on the edge of a confession. But then Lena's phone buzzed, and she looked away. The spell broke. Still, from that night on, they began to see each other often. Coffee turned into dinners, and dinners into long walks along the pier. Ethan told himself he just wanted to make sure she was safe, to understand what had happened to her. But every time she smiled, something inside him softened. One evening, as they walked by the water, Lena paused, watching the waves curl against the rocks. "Sometimes," she said, "I feel like I've been here before. Not this exact place, but somewhere like it. There's this smell, the salt, the rain. It feels like home, but I don't know why." Ethan swallowed hard. Maybe you used to live near the ocean. Maybe. She smiled faintly, then glanced at him. You remind me of it, you know. The ocean. He blinked. How so? There's calm on the surface, she said, but underneath, there's something restless. Something you're not saying. Ethan looked away, his chest tightening. He wanted to tell her everything, that he'd loved her, lost her, left her behind. That he'd spent years haunted by the sea that stole her. But how could he? If he told her now, he might lose her all over again. So he stayed silent. A week later, Lena invited him to an art gallery opening. She was helping a friend exhibit paintings inspired by memory and loss. The room was all white light and soft music, the walls lined with abstract seascapes. One painting stopped Ethan cold. It was a storm, violent brushstrokes of blue and black, a sliver of silver light cutting through the clouds. And at the bottom, almost hidden, a small figure clung to a broken piece of wood in the waves. Ethan stared at it, his throat dry. You painted this? Lena nodded slowly. A few months ago. I didn't even know why I was painting it. It just came to me. His heart hammered. Lena, what if those dreams aren't just dreams? She frowned. What do you mean? What if they're memories? She looked at him, and for a moment something flickered in her eyes, fear, recognition, confusion. She pressed a hand to her temple. Sometimes it feels like that, she whispered. But it doesn't make sense. How could I forget a life like that? Ethan reached out, his hand trembling. Maybe someone wanted you to. Her eyes met his, wide and searching. Ethan, who are you really? He froze. The question cut through him like lightning. Before he could answer, a loud crash echoed from the far end of the gallery. A display had fallen, scattering glass across the floor. The crowd stirred, and by the time he turned back, Lena was gone. Ethan stood amid the chaos, heart racing. He knew then that the past wasn't done with them. Whatever had brought her back from that island hadn't finished its story. And neither had he. The rain came again the next day, hard and sudden, drumming against Ethan's windows like impatient fingers. He sat in his darkened living room, her name pulsing in his mind, Lena, Claire, whoever she really is. The way she had looked at him before disappearing from the gallery haunted him. That flicker of fear and recognition had been too real to ignore. He tried calling her, but the number she'd given him went straight to voicemail. Her social media was almost empty, no photos, no family, no traces of a past. As if she had simply appeared a year ago and started existing. By evening, the rain had eased to a mist. Ethan grabbed his coat and went to the cafe, hoping she might return there out of habit. The lights were warm through the windows, a sharp contrast to the grey outside. And then, as if the universe had heard him, she was there, sitting by the window, staring blankly into a cup of tea gone cold. He approached quietly. Lena. She looked up, startled, then exhaled as if she'd been holding her breath. Ethan. I didn't mean to disappear. Something happened. He sat across from her, his pulse quickening. What kind of something? Her hands were trembling slightly. After the gallery, I went home and started getting these flashes. Like pieces of a dream trying to break through. The sea, the sound of thunder, someone shouting my name. And then I saw, she broke off, pressing her palms to her eyes. It felt real. Like I was there again. He leaned forward. What did you see? She looked at him, eyes wide and wet. I saw you. The words hit him like a wave. You were in the water, she said, her voice shaking. I think I was too. There was so much noise, rain, waves, the sound of something breaking. You were calling out, reaching for me. She touched her wrist unconsciously, right where the scar lay. I woke up and couldn't breathe. It felt like drowning all over again. Ethan's mouth went dry. Lena, you said you didn't remember anything before a year ago. Do you know where you were before that? She shook her head. No. They told me I was found on a small island off the coast of Malaysia. I was unconscious. No ID, nothing. They said I was lucky to be alive. I couldn't remember my name, so I chose one, Lena. Ethan's heart pounded. The island. It had to be the same one. He swallowed hard. And no one ever came looking for you? I guess not. Her voice cracked. Who would? He wanted to tell her everything right then, to say that he had been the one who stopped looking, that he had left that island believing she was gone. But the words stayed trapped behind guilt and fear. What if she remembered and hated him for it? What if the truth broke her? Instead, he said softly, maybe now we can find out who you were before. She nodded, though uncertainty clouded her face. There's something else, she whispered. Every time I dream about that night, I feel this rush of panic, like I was begging someone not to leave me. And I can't tell if it's real or if my mind's just inventing things to fill the gaps. Ethan's chest tightened. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. It's not your mind playing tricks. You were there. You survived something terrible. Her eyes glistened. How do you know? He hesitated, caught in the lie between silence and truth. Because The cafe door opened then, breaking the moment. A gust of wind scattered napkins across the floor, and Lena flinched as the sound of thunder rolled faintly outside. I can't do this right now, she whispered, standing abruptly. It's too much. I need time to think. Lena, wait. But she was already gone again, stepping out into the wet night. Ethan sat there, his heart pounding against the weight of everything unsaid. He knew he couldn't hide the truth much longer. She was remembering piece by piece, and soon the entire story, the storm, the island, his failure, would surface. And when it did, she'd have to face not just what happened to her, but what he did. What he didn't do. Lena didn't sleep that night. She dreamed of salt water again, thick and dark, pressing down on her chest until her lungs burned. In the dream, she was reaching for something, someone, but her hands found only cold. Then a flash of light, a voice calling her name, Claire, and everything went silent. When she woke, the name echoed in her head like a bell she couldn't unring. Claire. It didn't feel foreign. It felt forgotten. She sat up, heart pounding, and stumbled to her desk. Her sketchbook lay open where she'd left it, filled with drawings of the sea, waves, storms, fragments of a life she hadn't known she was remembering. On one page, she'd written a word over and over in the margins, half-conscious from some night's impulse, Ethan. The world tilted. She grabbed her phone, searching for answers, typing woman rescued Malaysia yacht accident into the search bar. Dozens of articles appeared, some years old. One headline froze her. Fiancée presumed dead after yacht disaster, survivor rescued from remote island. She clicked it. The photo loaded slowly, grainy, taken from a rescue helicopter. A man wrapped in a silver blanket, staring blankly at the sea below. His face gaunt, eyes hollow, but unmistakable. Ethan. And beside the article, another photo, a young woman smiling on a boat, sun in her hair. The caption read, Claire Donovan, missing at sea. Lena's hand trembled as she touched the image on the screen. Her own face stared back at her. She couldn't breathe. Memories came in flashes, her laughter on the yacht, Ethan's hand on hers, the sudden crash of thunder, and then the cold pull of the ocean. Her name, Claire, echoing through the storm. His voice, calling, fading. And then the island. The days she wandered the shore, calling for help. The rescue boat that came too late. The doctors asking her name, and her saying she couldn't remember. She pressed a shaking hand to her mouth. He thought I was dead. But why hadn't he come for her when she was found? Why hadn't he searched? Tears blurred her vision. She didn't even notice the phone slipping from her fingers until it hit the floor. Ethan was in his office when the call came. Mr. Rhodes, the receptionist said softly. There's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent. He didn't ask who, it was her voice that answered from the doorway. We need to talk. He turned slowly. She stood there, drenched from rain again, hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes burning with hurt. Claire, he breathed, the name slipping out before he could stop it. She froze at the sound. So it's true, she whispered. That is my name. Ethan's throat tightened. You remember. I remember enough, she said, stepping closer. The storm. The island. You calling my name. And then, nothing. Until now. She took a trembling breath. Why didn't you come for me, Ethan? Why did you leave me there? He couldn't meet her eyes. "I thought you were gone," he said hoarsely. "When they found me, they told me no one else survived. I searched the wreckage myself, I couldn't find you. The necklace washed up on the shore. I thought. You thought it was easier to bury me than to look for me." Her voice broke, quiet but sharp. "You moved on, didn't you?" "No," he shook his head violently. "I never did. I lived with that guilt every day. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw you drowning. I hated myself for surviving." She stared at him for a long time, tears glistening but unshed. "You could have found me," she said softly. "I was alive. For 3 years, I waited for something that never came. Do you know what it's like to wake up and not know who you are? To feel like you don't belong anywhere?" Ethan took a step closer, his voice trembling. "If I had known, God, Claire, if I'd known you were alive, I would have torn the world apart to find you." Her eyes softened, but only for a moment. "And now that you have," she whispered, "what are we supposed to do with everything that's left?" He didn't have an answer. The room was silent except for the faint hum of the rain against the glass. She looked at him one last time, something breaking quietly behind her expression. "You once promised me forever," she said. "But forever ended the night you let me go." Then she turned and walked out, leaving him standing in the echo of everything they'd lost. Ethan sank into his chair, staring at the pendant around his wrist, her necklace, the one he'd kept all this time. The sea outside the window looked calm, indifferent. But inside him, the storm had started again. The ocean was calm the night they met again, eerily calm, as if the waves themselves were holding their breath. Ethan hadn't expected her to come. He'd left a single message days ago, asking to meet at the old marina where they had first set sail all those years before. No explanations. Just, "Please. One last time." He stood at the edge of the dock, the wind brushing past him, carrying the faint scent of salt and rain. The water rippled faintly beneath the lights. And then he heard footsteps, soft, hesitant, familiar. Claire stopped a few feet away, her arms wrapped around herself. The night air made her hair shimmer, the same way it had on the yacht the day everything changed. "I almost didn't come," she said quietly. "I wouldn't have blamed you if you hadn't," Ethan replied. His voice was steady, but there was a tremor beneath it, like a man afraid to touch something fragile for fear it would shatter. Silence hung between them. Claire looked out at the water. "I thought I'd never come back to the sea," she said. "When they rescued me, I swore I'd never look at it again. But it's strange, no matter where I go, it finds me. In dreams, in paintings, in the sound of rain." Ethan nodded. "It finds me too." She turned to him then, her eyes softer than the last time they met. "You've been carrying it, haven't you? The guilt." He swallowed hard. "Every day. I told myself I left because I had no choice. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared of dying. Scared of losing everything. I thought if I survived, maybe I could make sense of it. But I didn't. I only lost more." Claire's gaze drifted toward the horizon. "You loved me once," she said. "I never stopped," he said simply. She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I want to believe that. I really do. But love without trust, it's just a memory we keep rewriting to make it hurt less." He stepped closer, the sound of water lapping beneath them. "Then let me rewrite it one last time, with the truth. You deserved better than the man who left you on that island. I can't change what I did. I can only tell you I've never stopped trying to make it right." She looked at him, searching his face for something, maybe the boy she once loved, maybe a stranger who carried his ghost. "You already have," she whispered. "You found me." The words hit him like mercy. For a long moment, they stood together in silence, the sea spreading wide and endless before them. The moonlight caught the silver pendant around her neck, her old necklace, now shining faintly against her skin. Claire unclasped it slowly and held it out to him. "I don't need this anymore," she said. "It used to remind me of who I lost. Now it just reminds me of who I became." Ethan hesitated, then closed her fingers back around it. "Keep it. It's yours. Always was." Their hands lingered together, neither willing to let go first. Finally, Claire drew a shaky breath. I'm leaving the city, she said. There's a place by the coast, quieter. Maybe I'll paint. Maybe I'll remember what peace feels like. He nodded, his throat tight. You deserve that. She smiled faintly through tears. And you? What will you do? Ethan looked out at the water, the reflection of the moon rippling across it. Maybe I'll stop watching the sea and start living again. They both knew this was goodbye, the kind of goodbye that doesn't need to be spoken, because the tide already knows how to carry it away. When she turned to leave, the wind caught her hair, and for a brief, beautiful moment, she looked like she had on the day he first saw her, bright, alive, untouchable. Ethan watched until she disappeared into the night. Then he looked out at the vast, dark water. The sea had taken her once. It had given her back. And now, finally, it was time to let her go. He stood there until dawn, the first light breaking over the waves like forgiveness. And when the sun rose fully, he whispered her name to the wind one last time. Not as a plea, not as regret, but as something softer. Love.